2 weeks ago, I met a guy on Tinder, Victor. In his profile photo, he had brown hair that was so dark, it almost looked black, styled in a sort of half-up, half-down style. His neck had a tattoo with a spider web behind his ear, with a web trailing down to showcase a realistic spider biting his neck. He had other tattoos, but they all seemed to be abstract compared to this one, seemingly just done any old way. He wore red contacts, but it almost looked like he had red eyes with a hint of brown that resembled honey in the sunlight. As his pink lips held a lollipop stick in his mouth, he was taking a selfie in the mirror of a public bathroom. I was about to swipe right, but decided to check his bio to be sure he didn't list anything that could be considered a red flag. He was my age, 23. His bio simply stated, "I hope you like vampires, because I'm a neck biter who doesn't mind the taste of blood." While all my friends found it cringy, when I told them about it, I found it arousing. I have a thing for vampires, if you couldn't already guess. So, this was a win for me. We got to messaging, and he expressed interest in hooking up. After some diligent planning, we agreed to start off going out to get to know each other. We wanted to take things slow, understanding boundaries and personalities before we began doing anything. Our first meetup was at the local Arby's, where we talked over sandwiches and curly fries. We had an incredible time. We shared many of the same kinks, interests, and boundaries. It was as if the sex gods had sent this gorgeous man in my direction for a reason. The night after that, I had began experiencing difficulties sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, it was as though something had triggered my beagle, Riley. He would start panicking, barking, and growling at my window. Every time I would go check, there would be nothing in sight. I figured perhaps the shadow of a nearby tree was upsetting him, so I put him in his crate for the night. I could hear his muffled barking downstairs for a few minutes, but soon it stopped. In the morning, I discovered something on my window. When I went to open the blinds, there was a handprint, as if someone was attempting to break in. However, they seemed to be bloody. The blood seemed as though it was dripping from the middle and index finger, then dried there. I rushed outside in my pajamas in the freezing cold to see if perhaps something had just rusted, but when I looked, the handprint was no longer there. In disbelief, I went back inside, and there wasn't anything. I chalked it up to nothing, assuming my half-asleep body was still adjusting to the morning light. I just went about my life until Victor and I had met up again. Something odd seemed to happen. When we were talking though, he asked me how the advertisement I was working on had come out. I work at a small bank as the graphic design department. I create all our advertisements, signs for our 4 locations, and promotional photos for social media. I had been working on an advertisement over the last week, but I had never told him that. At least, I don't recall telling him about it. Regardless, I answered the question no matter how odd it seemed to be. Again, the night after our meetup, strange things happened. When I sent Riley to go potty that night, he wouldn't come in when I was calling him, which is very unlike him. He's very well trained and somewhat clingy at bedtime, so I walked into the yard to find him staring at the fence. This fence separates my yard with my next door neighbor's yard. Riley was frozen in place, staring at a figure. This figure had on a hood, and I couldn't see his face because of the darkness. My neighbor's back porch light went out the other night, and they had yet to fix it, whereas mine doesn't really go far enough to see past this fence. The only thing I did see was 2 hands, their fingernails red like they were stained with blood. I screamed bloody murder, grabbing Riley and slamming the back door on the way back in. I locked all my doors and windows. After calling both police and my neighbors about the situation, everyone was getting my story. The police informed me that they could not do anything as I didn't see much, and neither of us have cameras to prove anyone was there. They told me it was probably a childish prank from another neighbor's kid. I felt so crazy in that moment, thinking perhaps I have started hallucinating or that my eyes played tricks on me. It was until the neighbor's wife let out her own scream of bloody murder that mixed with gut-wrenching sobs. We rushed over to their backyard, where the neighbor was hugging her now dead cat. I never knew they had a cat, but that's because he never had been let outside. The cat was covered in blood, said to be stabbed 7 times. I didn't sleep that night. I spent it sobbing, hugging Riley. It was clear the person had bad intentions, and I just narrowly escaped him while also saving my baby. I told no one in my life about this because I do not want them thinking that I am crazy. I know there is proof that last night was real. I'm still questioning if maybe I was seeing things, and it was some sort of spiritual sign to save my dog, even if I could not save the neighbor's cat. Victor was like a rock to me, giving something to look forward to as the traumatic visuals of that figure haunted my everyday movements. We set up a date to hook up, wanting to try something with blood and needles. I was excited as I have never had anything of this. I always loved exploring new kinks and fetishes. At work, it was clear I wasn't well as my boss sent me home early. On my way home, I stopped by a gas station to fill up and get some snacks. While I was pumping gas into my car, I heard my phone buzz in my purse. I fished it out of there quickly, seeing a weird text from my neighbor. She told me there was a weird man trying to break into my house, but when the police came there was no sign of him. However, very small portion of my lawn had been burnt by a cigarette left by the driveway. Now, I was freaked out. Why is this happening to me? Who is targeting me? Does this mean everything from before was true, and I'm the one this man is after? When I asked for a description, it was the same hooded figure from before, but when the neighbor asked to know who he was, he smiled at her with a blistered face and pink tea. She screamed, which alerted another neighbor to call the police. I now could not stay at my home, so with a friend, we headed to my house to gather my essentials, and I stayed with her for a couple days. I brought Riley along. Everything had seemed alright, nothing else had happened. However, the day I was meant to return home, a car followed me to work, driving away when I pulled into the parking lot. At first, I didn't question it as my friend has an apartment, and assumed he was part of the complex, taking a similar route to work. Looking back, it had to be that guy. When I got back home, my living room was wrecked. Nothing was stolen, no signs of a break-in, just trashed. Now, I was utterly terrified to stay in this house, as someone clearly had something out for me. I was not going to take the risk of sleeping here and getting murdered in my sleep. I told Victor about everything, and he offered to let me have his spare room. I protested, insisting I can get a motel. He refused, promising he had a gun if he needed to defend me from anyone. I reluctantly agreed, but his house was very welcoming. The decor was a mix of gothic but modern, yet it had all seemed to homey. Riley seemed a little uneasy, however, I assumed it was the stress of the stalker and having to constantly move. We hooked up the next night. It was amazing. He pleased me in a way I had not ever dreamed of, soon becoming addicted to him. We did it a couple more times afterwards. Every time we did, he wore me out and I would need a nap or to rest from the night. So, after some aftercare, Victor tucked me in and said he would wake me up in the morning when breakfast was prepared. At 3 a.m., I heard a scream, a dog's scream. My stomach dropped as I scrambled out of bed to rush downstairs, thinking Riley fell off something or got hurt somehow. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, there was a man. He had patches of hair on his head, red fingernails, blisters all over. He was leaning over Riley. I yelled for Victor, hoping he was in the bathroom. Only, the man turned to look at me and I screamed. The man was Victor, the same blistered man at my house, the same red fingernails from my neighbor's yard, and those pink teeth. He looked like he wasn't ready for me to see him. Riley was on this carpet, bleeding. He had been drinking his blood, the knife still in his pocket. He reached for it when I ran back upstairs and barricaded myself in his bedroom, the only room with a lock. The lock was locked with furniture in front of the door for good measure. I noticed a blood stain on his carpet under a chair in this room. This wasn't my first time. Yes, he had a vial of my blood from our session, but I thought we had used it. I found 4 more in the closet. When I emptied it, I knew I was in danger, especially as he pounded on the door, growling out my name. He soon resorted to stabbing the door, hoping I was behind it. I rushed to get dressed and grabbed my stuff as I heard him begging to be let in, saying he needs my blood to cure him. He needed my nutrients. He promised he would be good to me if I just supplied him with his medicine. I didn't listen, especially as he punched a hole through the door. I was out the window by the time he was peeking through the door, screaming my name. I had thrown my stuff before me, which somewhat cushioned my fall from the room. My ankle is messed up from the fall, but it didn't matter. I ran to my car and threw my stuff in the back as I saw the knife get stabbed through the front door. He ran after my car as I sped away. In the air, I explained everything to the nurses and the police. I've been tested for STDs and STIs. I haven't gotten the results back yet. I gave the police my statement, in which they informed me Victor's house was abandoned. No one had lived there in 5 years, and his Tinder was gone too. I only had a photo of his neck and chest, nothing of his face. I don't think they're ever going to find him, if he even exists. I do not feel safe. I've quit my job, moved, dyed my hair. I've even gotten filler hoping it changed my appearance some. I'm a wreck without Riley, but the image of that man drinking his blood haunts me from ever wanting another beagle again. I'm in a motel right now, as I hop between them hoping I'll never be discovered. I'm running out of savings, which terrifies me. My mom has offered up my old room if I ever need to move back home, and has suggested counseling. I cannot leave the motels, I just can't. I don't know if I'll survive, which is why I write to the internet in the hopes that if he does find me, at least the world will know I am not crazy, that my story can be a cautionary tale. Not everyone is as they seem. They can ruin your life in an instant. You can run into Victor at any time, and I cannot let another soul be cursed with being tortured by him too. So please, be careful who you meet online, especially Tinder.